The Philadelphia Eagles, their star receiver came out and made some comments after the game. They beat the Panthers 22-16, but it wasn't enough. Bryce Young almost led a 97-yard game-winning drive, had Xavier Legette caught on a wide-open pass. We're probably talking about this game as a different outcome, but the Eagles ended up winning the game. A.J. Brown was asked what can be better. He straight up said, passing. That's what needs to be better. Brandon Graham goes on his podcast and talks about how Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown were friends before, and now they got to make sure that personal doesn't get in the way of business, but he's now taken back and walked back those comments, and you can argue that people took it out of context. Where do you stand as the Eagles representative on the podcast?
Feels like you've been a little bit of an Eagles fan over the past couple weeks. You've been super locked in, and I love to see it. Great turnaround from where you used to be, man. Great
it's
turnaround.
funny that you mentioned that because I've been talking highly on the Eagles for weeks now. TikTok doesn't seem to think so because I don't think we've posted any clips on TikTok of me talking about the Eagles. And now there's going to be a clip on TikTok where we're talking about this situation. But the Eagles, though, I will say, they deserve their credit from where they were from the bye week to now. All those reservations I had early in the season, I still think that I was valid to have those reservations. They switched things around at the bye once they started starting Cooper DeJean. And every week since they've been on their win streak, I've been talking about this elite level defense. I even made a statement that I trust the defense more than the offense. The offensive rushing attack is elite, but the one problem with the Eagles right now is the passing attack, and Riv, you'll speak on that.
Yeah, and I think, listen, this has happened probably every year since A.J. Brown has been here. It's been and I say this all the time, wide receivers are divas. They're probably the biggest divas in the NFL because they require a lot. They really are very dependent on who's at the quarterback position to get them their targets, get them their yards, get them that money. So I think them being divas is justified, and I get it. They're the kind of the superstar, the picture of the group, and I get that. I get all that. But I feel like A.J. Brown has kind of been a little bit of a diva in Philly. And, with respect, he's one of the, we just talked about, he's one of the 5 best receivers in the world. This man last year went on a 8-9 game stretch of 100, and he was dominating the NFL. The year before that, he really broke out into the scene, and he was amazing. This year, before he got, even when he's played this year for the most part, he's been dominant. They've been undefeated with him on the field. So the impact is there. I think the contributions is there. I think he has a point. I think he has some validity. I think the passing does need to be better. I think it's been a little bit, you find yourself this year looking at this offense and you're thinking Jalen Hurts is at quarterback. You have the best offensive line in football. You have Devontae Smith. You have A.J. Brown. You have Dallas. This should be a team that has 30-plus touchdowns, 30 to 3,500 passing yards. You should see Smitty having 80 yards, A.J. Brown having 100 yards. It should be more fluid. You should be scoring 30-plus points a game. But it just hasn't. The rushing attack and passing attack hasn't clicked. A lot of the games, you see it in our win streak, we started off the game trying to pass, and that may lead to sluggish starts in the first quarter. And I always say this stat, like after the first drive, we're one of the best offenses in the league, and that's driven by our rushing attack. It's been dominant. It's been elite. It's been efficient. So I think, you kind of go with what works. But I think it's a little bit of both. Me and Joel was texting about it, and, there's definitely some sour moments in the play calling. There's some sour moments in the route concepts. Yeah. And I get it that Kellen Moore, for me, it feels like Kellen Moore relies a lot on A.J. Brown and Smitty to kind of just run a simple route and then make plays after that, get the ball and just make plays after. And they're good. They're talented, and I get all that. But in that Panthers game, it just felt weird. It felt like Jalen Hurts wasn't releasing the ball. It felt like he saw the read but didn't trust in the read, and it felt like he just didn't make plays. And I want to say A.J. Brown wasn't the only one that was upset. The problem that why people aren't upset at Smitty, because he was also another guy that was pretty upset. Smitty is pretty quiet. He's not going to go out in the media and talk about it. He's going to keep it in home, and that's another issue I had with Brandon Graham.
That was bad.
Regardless of if it's true or not, as a vet, you should know you keep that at home. You don't sit there, especially go on a podcast and say that, whether you were right or wrong, whether you were interpreted right or wrong. You keep that in home. This team is 11-2. You don't want nothing screwing this up. And Nick Sirianni, he came out this morning or yesterday saying they have that 2022 vibe. He's trying to break the tension, and I get it. I respect it. He's trying to take the attention off of that. But A.J. Brown was not right, but he has some validity. This passing offense has definitely left a lot to desire. It's left I felt like it's left a lot on its plate, and it needs to get better. I mean, AJ Brown was open a few times. You know, the play calling hasn't helped Hurts. You know, and of course, injuries have also, I felt like, held this passing game back. You know, Smitty's been in and out the lineup. AJ's been in and out the lineup. Dallas yet to come back to the lineup. So it's definitely hasn't been a consistent thing from time to time. But you're sitting at 11-2. I think right now, you know, I hope that this team, with the adversity that it's faced this year, they take this situation. They got 4 weeks to figure it out. They come out fire and they get the passing game going. Because if you don't get this passing game going, I get Jalen Hurts has been pretty clutch in fourth quarters, but a lot of it has been with his legs. Not too much with the passing game. I would love to see this passing game get going because I feel like if it does, we have the rushing attack. We are really becoming like the most unstoppable team in the league.
Right. This is the Eagles' one blind spot, the one and only blind spot at this roster. Because as you highlight last couple of weeks, going as far as said, this team can be a Detroit Lion team. I agree with that under the expectation that Jalen Hurts plays the MVP level he did 2.5 years ago. But in the 2.5 years since then, I think we've just consistently seen his regression as a passer. And that's not even to demerit Jalen Hurts entirely as a player, right? Because the running game and what he can bring on the ground does amplify Saquon Barkley. But purely in the passing game, we've seen it, maybe not as much in this Panthers game, but in recent weeks, they haven't found a rhythm in those first couple of drives where the game script is trying to get Jalen Hurts going. I think partly it is a scheme thing. I think partially it's Hurts' limitations in the pocket where this is going to be something that's present in the playoffs. The question is, how is Philly able to really mask that well enough by utilizing Saquon more in early in games? And then I think very importantly, how does Nick Sirianni deal with this? Because, you know, we've seen a lot of different receivers like Ayuk and Pickens have moments in the past with elite head coaches. And obviously I'm not suggesting Sirianni's that, but those coaches are able to keep that wide receiver in check. And I'm curious to see how Sirianni is able to really work around this because this is one of these problems in Philly that's been consistent. And I don't think Sirianni is a good head coach that can really figure that out. So I just want to see how he's able to really adjust because I do have a little bit of concern there in that part. And really not only the scheme, but then really the leadership structure and the culture kind of being able to shield that and mask that from the media.
Yeah, the Eagles are still great. 11-2. Go to the NFC Championship game, all of that. I do think, John, you make a good point. I love Jalen Hurts. He's my second favorite player in the NFL behind Lamar Jackson. Jalen Hurts also hasn't progressed as you want a franchise quarterback to progress, right? I think normally when you see a quarterback come out, especially a second round pick, that first year, that first really 2 years in the league, you just want to be like, this guy belongs here, right? This guy is a starting level quarterback. There's traits you can work with and you see progression. And I think for those first 2 years, you definitely saw it, right? His first full year starting, he wasn't, blowing anyone out of the water, but it was obvious this wasn't Zach Wilson, right? This is a guy that could play in the NFL. His second year fully starting, of course, they went to the Super Bowl. He puts up MVP numbers. Shane Steichen gets a job. You bring AJ Brown and all of this happens and he just has the best year ever. Since then, there's been some issues out of his control, right? Like you changed play callers a couple of times. This season, you've dealt with injuries to your wide receiver room, a couple to the offensive line as well. But just individually as a player, Jalen Hurts hasn't progressed as I would have expected him to, or as I would have wanted him to. Because I saw 2 years ago a guy in Shane Steichen's system go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, put up 35 points. If it wasn't for one damn fumble, you probably win the Super Bowl. You're a first ballot Hall of Famer, and you're going to the Eagles Ring of Honor and all that shit, right? But since then, he hasn't reached those heights. Really hasn't come close to reaching those heights. And I know when you look at the numbers, right, his passer rating, it's like over 100 since the bye, and the touchdown reception ratio is still pretty damn solid. But when I'm watching Jalen Hurts play, it's still a lot of the issues that I feel like were there, even when he was having a great season in 2022. Number one, I don't think he gets through reads quick enough. I think he has a tendency to look at one side of the field for too long and then try to make something with his legs. And that's the second issue. He breaks the pocket too often, too quickly, and 99% of the time he rolls out to the right, so defenses are already knowing in the back of their head, we know where Jalen Hurts wants to go. He's very rarely breaks off to the left. Every once in a while he does, but it's mostly out to the right, even when he has a clean pocket. I feel like those are two of his biggest flaws that he's had for multiple seasons now, and for someone who had such high flashes early in his career and got the bag, and I still think is any given year could be a top 10 quarterback, I would expect him to just improve on that more than he has, right? I do think Kellen Moore this season has had some good moments, some bad moments. Of course, we talked about the injuries and whatnot, but Jalen Hurts just individually as a player, I expected more of him to this point. I expected him to take that leap where he's solidified top 8 quarterback in the NFL, where he's not in these conversations any given week with the Jared Goffs and the Brock Purdy's and the Tuas, but he is clearly over that, and he has solidified himself with maybe not this season because CJ Stroud hasn't been as great, but for example, CJ Stroud from last season where he's like, oh yeah, no, he's top 8 quarterback. Like, he's obviously better than Tua. So I just expect a little more from Jalen Hurts at this point. I still think he's great. I still think you can win a Super Bowl with him because this Eagles team is so damn good. But I wish we've seen more for him develop as a quarterback, especially in the pocket, 4 or 5 years into his career.
The Panthers were really close to upsetting the Eagles. If Xavier Legette catches that pass, this is a loss. And even though the headlines are on Hurts in a passing attack, it's magnified. We're talking about the problems and pin and blame on people. Jalen Hurts had 108 passing yards on 21 attempts against a Panthers defense that they have been letting everybody go crazy on them. Like, everybody.
Saquon had a day.
Bo Nix had 4 touchdowns against them, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to not Bo Nix.
Marcus Mariota scorched that defense.
Yeah, Marcus Mariota, when Jaden Daniels went out, looked like a Pro Bowler. Yeah. And Jalen Hurts couldn't play well against the Panthers. He had his longest time to throw this season, 3.7 seconds. Lowest air yards per attempt of the season, 5.6. I think you're being too kind, Dels. If we're
top 8
Jalen Hurts gets grace because of the 2022 season, because we know the heights that he can reach. If you're measuring Jalen Hurts' play this year, he's a bottom 20 quarterback. He's a bottom 10 quarterback in the league. There are so many quarterbacks playing better than Jalen Hurts. Jaden Daniels is playing better than Jalen Hurts. Russell Wilson is playing better than Jalen Hurts.
He is.
Sam Darnold is playing better than Jalen Hurts.
Sure.
Tua is playing better than Jalen Hurts, especially since he's come back from injury.
Sure.
You can argue Baker is playing just as good as Jalen Hurts. There are so many quarterbacks playing better than him. And when you look at the Eagles, they're 32nd in pass attempts per game. The Packers are 31st. But they're able to air the ball out a little bit more, and Jordan Love's able to get a little bit more out of that passing attack than Hurts is with the Eagles. The Eagles have a mediocre passing attack. That's their Achilles heel. Teams want to get them into obvious drop back situations. It's much harder said than done because Saquon Barkley and that offensive line, they are a tank. But in the first half of games, the Eagles are always trying to establish the pass first. They had more first half pass attempts against the Panthers than they had second half pass attempts. But they noticed that this isn't getting going. They are the slowest first quarter team in the league in terms of points scored. They don't play well when they start off the gate. And it's because they put the ball in Jalen Hurts' hands and they want to make plays. I can give criticism where it's due. Kellen Moore, I'm not a fan of him. Dating back to Dallas, when I saw him run 4 curl routes, one with an offensive lineman, I was kind of out on him then. I think Kellen Moore, and that will always stick out. It was a playoff game, it's a non. That moment will always stick out to me. With the Eagles, I feel like a lot of the route combinations are out-breaking routes, which they're very hard throws for quarterbacks. In-breaking routes, curls, hitches, and then you have like a clear route that's never a true option on the read. Kellen Moore's offense is a pure progression-based offense. Shane Steichen in 2022, it was RPO-centric. It was Hurts, you're reading this linebacker, you're reading this slot corner. Based off where his leverage is, you're either going to hand the ball off or you're going to pass it. It was a lot of plays that were served on a platter for Hurts. Last year, Brian Johnson, I don't think he was a good play caller, so I'm not going to put much stock in that. But this year, Kellen Moore has asked Hurts to be a progression-based quarterback. And now he's overthinking. There are moments against the Panthers where A.J. Brown is wide open. I think a better quarterback, a quarterback that plays better in that game, A.J. Brown goes for 150 and 2 touchdowns. Like, that's how open A.J. Brown was on some of these moments. There was a moment where it's single high safety. The safety rotates over, doesn't even worry about A.J. Brown, and A.J. Brown's one-on-one, and Hurts doesn't let it rip to him. That was an automatic throw last year. That was something that I thought he relied on too much last year. A.J. Brown is having a historic season, not by the numbers, but when you look at his yards per route run, he's at 4.47. Last year, the league leaders in that, CeeDee Lamb was at 4.0. A.J. Brown's having an even better year this year, but it's not showing up in the box score because he's not getting the ball. And I do think that there are moments where he is the first read on plays and he's not getting it. Jalen Hurts is not throwing it. He's kind of just holding the ball. I think there are some situations where it's warranted because I do think it can get a little bit nitpicky. NFL Pro, all 22 film is accessible to everybody out there now. So everybody's going to have their own opinion. There was this one play in the red zone where it was a pick route for A.J. Brown and he was wide open. And you expect Jalen Hurts to make that throw. But based off the defensive alignment, the corners were pressed up on A.J. Brown and Jahan Dotson, I believe, who was an inside receiver. And Devontae Smith had off coverage in the slot. It was a 3 wide receiver set to the left side. In that situation, Hurts' job is to read the off coverage player. If they're playing press man, that usually indicates that those defenders are going to switch assignments. So A.J. Brown shouldn't have been open. He was, because the Panthers botched the assignment because of the Panthers defense. So the correct read was Devontae Smith off coverage, but A.J. Brown's wide open. You know, you expect him to throw a wide open touchdown at A.J. Brown. But that is the kind of thought process behind Jalen Hurts and why he's doing some things. He's kind of playing a little bit too robotic. He's playing specific to the process of the play, which is not a bad thing, but I don't think that's ever been Hurts as a quarterback. Like, Hurts as a quarterback is a big play machine, but there are things that he naturally struggles with. Like, he struggles with anticipation throws. He struggles with letting the ball go quickly. He does have a little bit of a slower release. His pocket presence is not the best. He's not the most accurate quarterback. So there are areas that he really struggles in. So they have to try to mask those things for him. But I think this is how I describe the Eagles in an analogy. They're like a white shirt. If you buy a clean white shirt, you see how those are the freshest shirts in my opinion. When you just have a white shirt, white tees,
like polo tee,
it's very easy to see if you get a stain on it because it looks so good. So like a stain is going to stick out. That's the Eagles. They're 11-2. They're playing high level football, but the stain right now on them is that Hurts is not playing good enough. And in order for the Eagles, I think, to make the Super Bowl and win it, I think he needs to start playing better. But they're also so stacked that he could play like this and they could still win because this is really a juggernaut team.
We need him at his best against Detroit, even against Minnesota, like
especially Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, Hurts could go two ways. He could go down the path of being just a complementary piece of the offense, where, like Joel, you mentioned, he's a few times a game he could make a big play. He could hit AJ on a go shot. He could hit Smitty over the middle of the field. He could hit Saquon, on a wheel or something, and make explosive plays happen and really uplift this Philly team, which I agree, Rev. I think you need that to beat Detroit. I think even though we have some questions about whoever comes out of the AFC, when it comes down to the Super Bowl, you're going to be going up against Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. You're probably going up against one of those 3 quarterbacks. You're going to have to make big time plays. So Jalen Hurts can either be a reason why you win the Super Bowl by making those big plays, or he could just be part of the team where he's basically doing what he has done, which is he's efficient. He's not turning the ball over. Yep. He's, keeping the ball out of harm's way. You're keeping these offensive drives going because the offensive line, Saquon Barkley, and the defense are all so damn elite. They don't need to do much, but it does feel like if this is the path that it goes, the ceiling is capped because we see how explosive Detroit could be offensively, even though Jared Goff has limitations.
I think I need that. And this game sticks out to me this year because it really was a ridiculous game. Game against Jacksonville. We're in Philly. We had the classic green on. And fourth quarter, needed a score. He goes big play to Smitty. Smitty, I think he had the big play on the... It was on the left side. Smitty made a big play. Smitty does what he does. But then hit Smitty in the back of the end zone. Big touchdown. Like, where is that guy? Where is the guy that's like, fuck it?
He's still there. I believe it.
Like, you got A.J. Brown, a top 5 guy in the world. You have Smitty, a top 15 talent in the world who can catch damn near anything in his radar. Throw the fucking ball. Like, I'd rather you make an attempt. That's why I don't give a fuck about Josh Allen turnovers. Because, he turns the ball over, but damn, he's giving his receivers a chance. Like, he's throwing deep balls to Khalil Shakir. You mean to tell me we can't throw a deep ball to Smitty and A.J. Brown? Like, come on, brother. Like, come on. Let's make it work.
That Shakir touchdown was nice. He took the jet.
That was amazing.
Shakir about to get a caveman.
After the catch,
the ball placement on the Hollins tuds are amazing.
He's so small, too.
He's so legit
shifty.
after the catch. He can break so many tackles. With the Eagles, like, the vibes are just off. And I think it's on A.J. Brown to control his emotions as well. I know that A.J. Brown thinks that he's as good as Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson.
100%.
And he sees what Darnold's doing with Jefferson. He sees what Burrow's doing with Joe Burrow. And he's like, why can't Jalen Hurts do that with me? There was a touchdown to Grant Calcaterra, the backup tight end that filled in for Dallas Goedert. It was his first touchdown of the season. This play stuck out to me the most because it's his first touchdown of the season. He's celebrating. He's so happy. An Eagles player on the back end is over here like this. And then A.J. Brown's just like, he was open. He was open first. And Jalen Hurts held on to the ball and Grant got open and he got the touchdown. But it's plays like that where you have to understand what matters the most. And what matters the most is that touchdown just put you up 22-16 in the fourth quarter. And you got to be happy for your teammate, even if that wasn't you that got the ball. Even if that wasn't the design. You have to find a better way to mask your emotions because you can't just throw Hurts under the bus, even if he's playing poorly. You have to pick him up and you have to believe in him. And at the end of the day, this was a win. They're 11-2, and you're calling the offense out. And now we're talking about it. Now Brandon Graham's talking about it. Now it's becoming a bigger issue than it has to be. Hurts, I think the limitations as a quarterback, they've been there. Yep. But Kellen Moore has a static passing offense, and he doesn't make things easier for his quarterback whatsoever. That's why I was never a big fan of the marriage between the two, because that's just not the style of quarterback that Hurts is. So hopefully they figure it out. I was talking to River about it, but I think I know they're probably prioritizing Saquon setting the record this year for rushing, and he could do it. He can do it. You have to make sure the passing attack is at its best in the playoffs.
How about we start the game running and then get into
That's a possibility. And they have to really make it a point of emphasis to get Hurts in this passing attack going. Even if it's at the risk of not breaking a rushing record, you have to make sure this is at its best. Yeah, you can't just ignore the problem.
As a fan, I need that record. I'll be honest. We need that for Saquon. But I definitely think have some more balance. I also think AJ was probably upset because we should have beat the shit out of them, and we're sitting here in a tough dugout game with the Panthers, literally almost lost.
Bryce was making some throws, man. I can't even lie.
He was making some
Bryce Young is playing awesome right now. He really is.